Hello! My hair is inordinately dirty. Today's video is going to be why I don't personally like to read YA. Not that I never do it, but I usually don't. And I decided to make this video because I'm reading a YA book. Or at least, I don't know how this is defined, but to me this is very YA because it features a 13-year-old protagonist, Emma, who is in a dystopian-ish situation, I think. I'm not sure I'm using that word correctly, but not in the like 2010s dystopian YA, in the like 20th century communist dystopia. And it also features some magic, but not magical realism and not high fantasy magic. It's not like elaborate world building. It's like grandma knows how to do magic. Very like, I don't know, quotidian magic, if that makes sense. And I'm really enjoying this, but it's kind of made me think about a couple of the reasons why I personally do not gravitate towards young adult fiction. Now, a little bit of backstory. I did used to read a lot of YA. I was very much wrapped up in the post-Twilight vampire romance genre. And I do think that some of this makes me feel a little bit awkward because I'll read these, like, it kind of reminds me of reading books from when I was 10 years younger. Actually over 10 years younger, probably close to 12 or 13 years younger. So to me, it's literally like rereading stuff from half a life ago, and I don't feel a need to do that. I also, yeah, I'll say that's like a big reason. But yeah, just to say that like I have read YA. It's not like I never touched them and I'm like continuing to like look my nose down. And I'll also say that my mom, when I was younger and reading like The Lightning Thief and stuff, she also read that, and she read Harry Potter when I was younger. So it's not like I never had any examples of adults reading young adult fiction, or like I got this like from a family that was just like, oh, that's not real literature. No, I very much have people in my life who were adults reading YA. Okay, getting into it. So one of the first things I'll say that's really hard about YA for me, and it's really particular to me potentially, is there's a lot of bullying, and there's a lot of seeing children who don't have the authority, sometimes the vocabulary, the experience, the kind of larger picture perspective to understand what's going on. So a lot of times you'll find kids who maybe don't understand something and they're getting in trouble, but like any person with like foresight would be like, oh, well, that's not fair for you to be judged for that. I'm thinking about a character in this book who she's continually getting in trouble, but it's because of stuff that she's like ignorant to, and anyone who's reading the story knows like, okay, it's very obvious why she's ignorant to that, but she's still like facing the ramifications of that, or she's getting bullied. And you know, it's so hard to read that, and I feel like I'm always kind of for an underdog, and it makes me so mad. And you know, I think oftentimes young people, they just don't have the recourse. They're under so much like of a thumb of authority. And as an adult, oftentimes you have experience, or you have the ability to kind of move around. And as a kid, like when you're in high school or when you're in grade school, you kind of have to do what people tell you to do, even if it's wrong and even if it's unfair. And oftentimes, like, all you can say is that's not fair. And as you grow older, you learn more effective ways of communicating why something isn't fair. But when you're a kid, it's just that's not fair. And I get really bothered by that. It's really hard for me to read. So I'll say one of it is just, it's actually very much a personal thing of like, I don't like reading stuff like that. A second reason why I don't like YA, and this kind of has to do if you read or if you watch The Financial Diet, Chelsea Fagan, she talks about on Instagram or something, she only follows people who are over the age of 50 because for her, she wants to curate a feed of like older women living their best lives, if you will, something along those lines. And I think for me, that is something that I kind of relate to. First of all, I am no longer a young adult. I'm an adult now. And so either these experiences are things that I have gone through, and therefore I don't need a coming of age story. I need an of age story. And even if it's maybe about a topic, like there's a lot of YA lit featuring queer stories, for example, I can read that from an adult perspective. I think there's plenty of literature that has similar themes, but is taking it from an adult perspective, and I can just read that. So that's one element of it. But the other element too is that, I don't know, and I was also talking about this with my friend about how the sense that like, she was saying like, oh, it feels like I'm past the age of being a protagonist or a hero of a story. Like they're all 18, you know, like am I past that? And to me, it's always like, that's been a very frustrating thing about YA, is that you have this 18-year-old who's experienced like an entire lifetime of stuff, and you're like, you're a child, you still have so much life left to live, and yet I'm supposed to think that your story is somehow done. It almost makes more sense for this to happen to, you know, a 30-something where they're more established, and, you know, that can be like the rest of their life. I especially feel that way with romance, where I'm supposed to like feel some kind of catharsis over a 17-year-old falling in love. Like, you are 17, it will end shortly. Don't worry about it. That's great. You should experience the whole gambit of relationship experiences. Don't stop just because you found one good one. So that's just how I feel. I feel like it's so weird to kind of like pin all of this as though someone's like lived their whole life by the age of 18 or 19 or 20 or something. Like, there's so much left, and I don't know. I have never liked that about YA, and I think it's something that makes sense because, you know, if you're 15, you want to know that like everything's resolved by 18. That feels really nice. But as someone who's past that, it's kind of like, you're gonna have a lot more. You're gonna have a lot more coming. Don't worry. And along with that, I will say I just don't love relationships with people who are like under the age of 18. It just kind of is a little weird to me and a little gross. And I'm someone who's totally fine with like PDA or like all of that. But for some reason, when you're like, that's a high schooler, you know, it just kind of gives me a little bit of an ick, and I don't like it. Yeah. And so what is my final point? My final reason for not preferring YA is I feel like a lot of literature geared towards older people focuses more on like the philosophy and perspectives of the characters. I think that it's trying to describe a world that we live in a little bit more than talk about someone going through an experience. Allow me to elaborate. So I feel like I was reading a book about the Iranian Revolution, or like kind of pre-Iranian Revolution, and a lot of it featured a very young female protagonist, like a child. And we're seeing all this stuff happen around her. Because she is a child, she is not able to talk about it, to provide her thoughts or her feelings. It's just this sort of backdrop to her youth. Versus if you're talking about like an older character going through that, they're able to say, well, these are my thoughts and my opinions and how I feel, and this is what this character is thinking and why they're thinking that. And I think that that is, in my opinion, more along the lines of what I would like to read. A lot of times with YA, you are seeing a character who the political upheaval, the realities of their life are truly a blurred background to the focus of their kind of immediate storyline and the actions that are happening. And I've said this in multiple videos, I prefer that kind of some semi-boring internal monologue of characters telling you what the world is like around them. And so I think that I am almost in that way unable to enjoy a lot of YA because it's aiming to, rather than to tell a story of a situation, it's aiming to tell a story of an individual who is defined by a situation. And I care more about a person telling the story of the situation. That's like so vague. I know, I apologize. I know sometimes, how do you like describe it more appropriately than that? And again, I'm sure that there are plenty of examples of YA that exactly do what I enjoy. And if you have it, I would love to get your recommendations. But again, I feel like a lot of that, like a lot of the good stuff that exists in YA, I can read about a character who's like 35, and I would enjoy that more. So yeah, that's been this video. Like I said, currently reading this book, and even though it is YA, I am thoroughly enjoying it. So clearly literature that I can enjoy that is geared towards people younger than me does exist, but 'tis harder to find. Anyway, I hope you're having a really great day, and I can't wait to see you in my next video. Bye-bye.